Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Javi. My nickname's Javi, but anyways, guys, today is August 30th or August 29th, just barely because it's 11:41 Eastern Standard Time PM, but it's August 29th, 2018, and we're gonna take a look at the Atlantic right now because the Atlantic, although it has been nearly a record-breaking year for the Atlantic in terms of how quiet it has been in the Atlantic, we're gonna start to see the Atlantic ramp up a little bit because, as you can see right now, we obviously have this potential tropical cyclone that has a high chance of developing over the next 5 days, a 70% chance, and we may have a possible tropical cyclone development in the Gulf of Mexico going into our Labor Day weekend. Although it doesn't say it in the 5-day tropical weather outlook as of right now, it's still very possible we could see a tropical cyclone develop in the Gulf of Mexico. And then we have two other systems in the eastern North Pacific, as we won't take a look at them much because they don't seem like an immediate threat to land. So we're going to focus on the Atlantic for this one. So the first tropical cyclone we're gonna check out is the tropical cyclone that does have a small chance of developing in the Gulf of Mexico. As you can see where I'm pointing my mouse right there, where it's just to the east of Puerto Rico, and you can see that it's basically this very disorganized area of thunderstorms. It's basically on life support at this point, and the reason why it's in life support is because we have a ton of wind shear, and you could kind of tell by the direction these thunderstorms are trying to go. You could see that although the thunderstorms are trying to push towards the west, you could see that the thunderstorms, as they develop, you could see the cloud tops of the thunderstorms are swaying towards the east, and that's due to the strong wind shear with the winds coming from the west. You could see the red you see right there, right over that tropical wave, represents the unfavorable conditions for tropical cyclone development due to the high wind shear. So it doesn't seem likely at all or nearly impossible for this to develop in its current state. But as you can see, in the Gulf of Mexico, it's expected to take a more northwestern track towards Florida, and you can see that the tropical cyclone development becomes more favorable as the wind shear lessens as we head over the next 5 days or so, as the storm continues to move to the northwest. So we definitely need to keep an eye out. And what's also interesting about this tropical cyclone is that it's going to go over warmer than average Gulf of Mexico water temperatures. So this whole year, most of the main development regions of the Atlantic has mostly stayed cooler than average, but we're starting to see those temperatures rebound as we get more and more into the peak of the hurricane season, which is arguably September 10th. We're about 11 days away from that point, but there are some hints that the peak of the hurricane season may be later than the average peak, which is September 10th. It may be late September, but we're starting to see the signs that we could see a more active hurricane season because, as meteorologist Michael Lowry states, we see that this is the first time this hurricane season where the sea surface temperatures of the Atlantic and the weekly wind shear is just remaining about average. Since most of the year, the wind shear for 2018 has been well above average, and we see that for the weekly sea surface temperatures, you can see based off of this chart, it's been mostly below average, and we're starting to see those temperatures rebound as the days and weeks go on into this hurricane season, which may be a worry for the Atlantic since it's starting to rise right at the peak of the hurricane season. If this was rising towards the October-November timeframe, it wouldn't be as big of a deal because that's when the wind shear really starts to hinder tropical cyclone development during those months, making it nearly impossible for any tropical cyclone development during those months. But but since it is happening as we're going into the peak of the hurricane season, is a little bit worrying, as we could see potential tropical cyclone development as the months go on with this hurricane season, as many people shouldn't put their guard down just yet, because August was a very quiet month, but the hurricane season could easily rebound. And as for this tropical cyclone development, what's going to be the key here is how there's still a lot of uncertainty with this tropical cyclone just to the east of Puerto Rico, because we're not 100% sure how much wind shear is going to affect this storm. Although it's very low right now, the wind shear, it's still very uncertain, because we're looking 5-6 days from now, and usually any forecast above 5 days is very difficult to forecast in the hurricane season. It's not really until maybe 2 to 3 days before it actually happens that we get really a confident forecast, but it's just very uncertain how much wind shear will be in the Gulf of Mexico by Labor Day weekend. And also, it's also the land interaction with this, because the European is taking mainly a weak tropical cyclone making landfall somewhere between Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. But as we move forward, you could see that very late, right around September 5th on a Wednesday, you could see that there's just this small, very minuscule low pressure system that isn't at all very powerful, and not even powerful enough to justify having the L icon right over it. That's how weak it is. The European is taking it, as the European is taking this storm to develop very late. As you can see, it makes landfall in Louisiana at 1,011 millibars, which is probably just barely a tropical storm. But even if this doesn't develop, people during the Labor Day week next week should still keep this in mind, because it could cause some heavy rain issues and possibly some thunderstorms, which may affect enhanced thunderstorms, which may affect some plans during your Labor Day weekend. But as for anything else in the Atlantic, we do have this, like I mentioned earlier, we do have this tropical wave that has a high chance of developing over the next several days, which is coming off the coast of Africa, as we're seeing a pattern where most of the hurricane season in the Atlantic, the reason why it was so weak, at least based off of my perspective, is that since we had so much rising motion in the US, and especially in the Northeast and the Northern Atlantic, it kind of hindered any development from in the main development region, because in meteorology, like I always say, if there's a lot of rising air in one location, it has to sink somewhere else at the same rate. And it seems like it was sinking right over the development region, which was causing so much dry air and unfavorable conditions in the Atlantic. But now we're seeing a dominant high pressure, which brought very high temperatures in the Northeast and much of the East Coast of America. And so it gives kind of an opportunity for the main development region to really develop off of a potentially lower pressure area, since the high pressures are more up north and the low pressures up to the north are not forcing the high pressure areas to the south. So we do have a 70% chance of tropical cyclone development. The good news is that both the European and the GFS model are taking this storm up north, and it's unlikely it's going to hit the Caribbean or US, but it's still very uncertain at this point, because we're going to see a weakness in between the areas of the high pressures that's dominating the East Coast right now and the Azores and Bermuda high. So it's going to give this low pressure an area where it could seep through between these low pressure systems and basically just become an extratropical cyclone after it gets absorbed by one up in the north. But this usually happens with tropical cyclones that make a turn up north. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day and subscribe for more.